Good evening. We are ISIS News Report. I'm Kei Hasagawa.
I'm Atman Ali Station.
I am Jack Carey.
And I'm Chris Byrne.
And here, we channel our unique culture of collaboration and apply classroom learning across the disciplines to pressing global problems.
Throughout the course of history, societies have undergone social movements and change through the coordinations and organization by a group of people.
As technology has grown and become more advanced, methods of organization and communication have become more advanced and efficient.
We need to ask ourselves, does this necessarily mean that social change can occur more effectively or more efficiently?
Most every social movement of the modern era has strived to use the most efficient and sophisticated methods of communication possible. Whether it be the stagecoach, postal service, or newfangled television broadcasts, progressive forms of communication and the dispersal of information have been vital for change.
When considering information and communication technologies and social movements, nothing is more recent and relevant than the Arab Spring protests of the last few years.
Here we present to you a short look at the movement and how ICT defined it.
In the 2011 Arab Spring protests, social media networks played an important role in the rapid disintegration of at least two regimes, Tunisia and Egypt, while also contributing to social-political mobilization in Bahrain and Syria. Admiral Carey, can we please have a military perspective on this issue?
Absolutely, Kay. In Egypt, the socio-political gap between the small ruling elite and the bulk of the population had long reached critical levels. However, the fact that the crisis occurred in direct follow-up to the protests in Tunisia was due to the initial mobilizing effects of ICT and social media networks.
You know, these protests were kickstarted by a Facebook campaign run by as opposition April 6th Youth Movement, which generated tens of thousands of positive responses to call to rally against government policies.
Absolutely. The profile of the most active users, by the way, young, urban, and relatively educated, correlate to the first anti-government protests in January that later led to the larger campaign in February. In this effort, social media networks were critical in organizing the protests and disseminating information about them, including publicizing protesters' demands internationally.
Believe it or not, Facebook reportedly outmatched Al Jazeera, the most reliable Middle Eastern news source, in the speed of news dissemination.
As the rebel groups grew in strength and size, the governments of the revolutionary countries began to realize that ICT had become an ominous unifying force for rebels of diverse backgrounds.
Upon this realization, many governments attempted to stop the rebels' access to ICT. Government reaction to anti-government material ranged from censorship to hacking Facebook pages of civilians, to even deleting political protest pages. This occurred in Libya, to the drastic measure of a complete internet shutdown. In Egypt, 93% of internet addresses and networks were shut down.
However, the international cyber community and hacktivists came to the rebels' aid. Anonymous commenced Operation Tunisia by issuing a threat video and subsequently launching cyber attacks on government websites and providing tools to fight the government.
In addition, when governments censored opposition websites, countries came to each other's aid by moving internet hosts to uncensored countries. Within countries, the educated youth, who were mainly the leaders of the revolution, introduced router and path diversity methods, IP proxy servers, and Google Voice to their peers.
The rebels proved that a complete information shutdown is virtually impossible. A nation's leaders no longer have the authority to stop a group of citizens that are motivated with the desire for freedom and are backed up with international support from this world of interconnectedness.
The actual impact of ICT in these revolutions, however, has been debated recently. Many critics are now claiming that in order for revolutionaries to congregate in dangerous situations like the one in the Middle East, it requires very strong personal connections between the revolutionaries.
Social media by virtue can only form weak link connections, implying Twitter and Facebook were not in fact the major causes for mobilization of revolutionary efforts.
And even more recently, there has been question of whether the Arab Spring movements were even successful at all. Some tyrannical governments like that in Libya have maintained full control of their nations.
And others, like in Egypt and Tunisia, were indeed overthrown.
But the principal revolutionary groups in charge of the overthrow were unable to take power or unable to lead well, and significant unrest has continued.
Yeah, some critics have claimed that the usage of ICT was direct cause to some of the failures like this because the groups that formed as a result were network-based rather than hierarchy-based. And to quote Malcolm Gladwell, they can't think strategically. They're chronically prone to conflict and error. So if ICT had such a big impact on the revolutions and now it's appearing as though they failed, was ICT really such a good thing?
Admiral Carey here. We've been under unrelenting social media fire all day. Facebook and Twitter posts have been brutal. I don't know what we're gonna do, but we need some backup.
So while ICT had its limitations in the Arab Spring, it's clear that ICT did help. So the Arab Spring protesters used the power of ICTs for crowd mobilization, political campaigning, and incitation to rebellion. ICT removed the traditional characteristics of strong protesters based on age, gender, knowledge, and physical strength. Now, only a stable internet connection was what stood in actively contributing to the revolution.
Yeah, it's definitely clear that from the early phases of ICT, it may not have the bandwidth to initiate a revolution per se, but it has very valuable benefits in crowdsourcing and mobile data communication. And this dissemination of protest information, it is the start, but its true value lies in the fact that it's able to connect people worldwide, regardless of age, gender, location, and they can all contribute on multiple levels to this building momentum of the revolution.
Right, and these considerations must be addressed if future revolutionaries seek to utilize ICT as an aid. If done correctly, it can indeed become a powerful tool and assist in changing the world. If done incorrectly, it can contribute to the failure of revolutionary groups and a situation of continued unrest like we see today in the Middle East.
We're on the scene of a protest where hundreds of people are being arrested for rioting in the streets.
This is garbage! These people said their protests are for peace. They're just causing more unrest. We need to stop them. Institute a policy of shutting the internet down until this stops. We can get our nation back to normal.
I greatly enjoyed being able to focus on the disciplines that most interested me. I'm still on a journey of self-discovery, and this class has certainly spurred me along in my pursuit of deeper meanings.
I love my experience in this class. I thought our final project was especially interesting because we had people from very different disciplines all looking at one topic, which was the Middle East and the Arab Spring, and we all have different ways of looking at it, and I think that collaborated very well to make our final piece, and I look forward to taking more classes like this.
I thought it was really cool. I really enjoyed how we learned about the computer science aspect from a different perspective. Learning about kind of where our current state of technology is, the problems we're facing with it, and how to approach that from a societal standpoint, and the policies that have to be implemented for the problems of the future and all that. It was really interesting. I learned to think about information and kind of the way our society works in a totally different way.
Hey, it's Atman. I'm really glad I got to take this course. I think I learned a lot, especially through our final project. Not only did it change my awareness on the events happening in the Arab Spring, but it also just gave me a whole new understanding of how connected ICT is with our lives.